Hi, I'm Bill Dotson from Shires Colonial American Distillery in Williamsburg, Virginia. We originally started out as part of Blackbeard's crew, and one of the members told us that they didn't have a period rum, and pirates love rum, as you know, from Hollywood. It's kind of advanced that notion. So being interested in a distillery, we decided that a period or theme to the distillery might be worthwhile. And we started researching and found out that nobody was covering colonial American distillation history. We're trying to make it our theme to cover the period of American distillation.
Anyway, I am really excited about this interview because it's Saturday morning and it is in December, and I am thoroughly excited because we at the Distillery Channel have interviews all the time, but this interview I've been looking at the research, and if you love history and love America in terms of the history and where we came from, we've got the guy that's going to share just an incredible background history of his life and then what he's doing today. So anyway, I am Randy Weckerly. I am the host of this wonderful Distillery Channel, and what we are doing is we like to share podcasts from around the country. And from Williamsburg, Virginia, I have the wonderful Dr. Bill Dotson joining us today. Good morning, Dr. Bill.
Not just Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg.
I'm sorry. It's early. It's Saturday morning. What do you want from me? I got to watch Tiger and his young son play golf sometime this afternoon. So.
Oh, did he have his son too?
Well, it's it's exciting though. It's a great day. Anyway, I'm more excited to talk to you, and I'm glad you're feeling well. The history of what you're doing. But first, before we get into that, your personal resume is one that I've shared with my company since the last time we talked. So just give us the highlight reel of that, and everybody hold on to your socks, because, mine started with, not your background. So go ahead and share your background, where you came from and what brought you here today.
Oh, that'll take us an hour.
Well, you got 2 minutes. No, go ahead.
Ex-aerospace engineer, hang glider, pilot, I did design work for United Technologies Pratt Whitney for the F-15, the F-16, and the F-22 engines.
Wow.
The whole industry collapsed on us, so I had to find something to do. So went into dentistry and then specialized in endodontics. And now we will probably run one of the top 5 practices in the world for root canals.
Do you really?
Yeah, it's really quite exciting for me. I don't know about if it's for you and everybody else, but
I don't have any problem with root canals. I've had a lot of them, I seriously, my dentist, got a great dentist, but one of the top, and doesn't surprise me, one of the top in the world. I think that's just the way you do things. So
when I was young, my dad was an oral surgeon. He was the first oral surgeon in the Eastern Virginia area when I started licensing him. And he had some advice. He said, when you retire, have something to do.
Yeah.
And I can see you're having fun doing what you're doing. So
yeah. Yeah.
My advice was the same, and we figured playing checkers and whiskey and telling stories was a fun thing to do when I retire. So that's coming up soon, and we were trying to prepare it. We started the distillery. Found out there was a missing niche in there, one of the history of whiskey in America, and we have dove into it head first and been studying it for the last 7 years. And so now we're ready to kind of go public with it.
Yeah, and the history really goes way back into the Wayback Machine, as they used to have back on the cartoons in the day. So the Wayback Machine actually goes back to around 1608 to 1620, somewhere in that era, right? Where the history of. So go ahead and begin.
Well, our first product that we're creating historically goes back to that era, to the 1608 and 1620. Our first 2 products, actually. But the history of whiskey in America actually starts before that, back in 1584. In North America, actually. South America probably had some distilled spirits prior to that. some of the early explorers, starting in 1584, brought a product called aquavit or eau de vie with them on their ships. It was just becoming popular, and they thought of it as a medicine back then.
Of course. And why not?
We're old enough to think back to our great aunts having their little nip of medicine before bedtime too.
Right, yeah.
Kind of carried over the generations, and the terminology is kind of fading out now. But we step back to 1608 to when John Smith came over, and Jamestown Rediscovery here on Jamestown Island opened up the well and the graves and found pieces of glass they couldn't account for. When they finally learned to assemble the pieces together and found out what it was, they discovered it was a glass still. And our research took us back to that era and found out that glass stills were what they used back then, that the metal stills had not become popular yet. And when they first started becoming popular, they found out that the metal stills actually injected a poison into the products. So they decided that glass stills were the only ones usable. And shortly after that, around the time of 1620, they were starting to discover that metal stills could be used. The secret ingredient that they had to get out was lead.
There you go.
Yeah. Alcohol very easily extracts lead and takes it into solution. So once they got the lead out, then they could go commercial and produce it in larger volumes. And all of a sudden in the early 1600s, distilled spirits took off, became very popular around the world.
Yeah, so, to fast forward, so back then, just for a little historical purposes, George Washington was interested in distilling. Some people might not know that, but he was rather interested. And Thomas Jefferson, I think, was into the wine, possibly. So our leaders were well relaxed, I guess, and why not? And nothing's different today, so it's okay. But the situation is, what I love about the history of it, and I want to go fast forward because this is the thing that most people, when I talked after our last conversation, is that you're actually getting the water out of a very special well.
Oh yeah, the 1608 well out on Jamestown Island had not been fully excavated. So when they excavated it a couple of years and started pulling these glass shards out, they got to the bottom and found water. And they said, well, what do we do with it? And they put it aside and had no use for it for a couple of years. And I was over there helping them with the excavation of the first governor's grave in the church. And they mentioned it to me, and I said, I'll take it. And
of course.
So we took the water and combined that with a couple of other era products and tried to create a whiskey close to what it would have been back in that 1608. So we reproduced that still, that glass still. I'm going to show it to you in just a minute.
Yeah, can't wait.
The water from the well, from the 1608 well, we had the Jamestown glass house, which hand blows period glass, blow the bottles for it. We just got an award for the bottle, for the packaging and everything, the way we put it all together. We got a double gold award, which is very rare. They'll give a double gold award out for it. So our 1608 got a double gold.
Oh, congratulations. Who was the award from?
I just found out a couple of minutes ago. So
is that right? Well, breaking news right here.
Driving in the car, so I haven't had a chance to look it up yet. One of my
right. I love the news. We'll find out.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
So the still, the water, the grain we imported from England, like John Smith would have brought over, and the bottle, we combined all that to try and create a 1608 product, similar to what they had back then. The only thing we had to do to meet the modern standards was take what they call the heads out. And the heads, when you distill, is the poisons that are methanol, acetone, and ethyl acetate have to come out. So I apologize for not being fully authentic to you and your listeners, but we felt it was in their best interest.
So they left a few of those in, are you saying, in the olden days?
In the olden days, yes, they did.
How nice.
An ex-aerospace engineer, I studied some of these things, and when we actually used the still to make it, we learned that the type of still, which is called an alembic still, as opposed to a pot still, which you use today, actually bled off most of the poisons before they drank it. It didn't really start condensing until they got to the heavier alcohols close to ethanol. So even though we know today with pot stills we have to remove those, back then they didn't have to worry about it.
Well, it's it's incredible because the other things that you did as you went along the way. Now, were you first making rum or whiskey or bourbon, or what's been your path to where you're at today?
We started out as part of a group, Blackbeard's pirate crew here. Mm-hmm. And one of the members looked at me and he said, you know, the sad part about being a pirate is we don't have period rum from back then. I looked at him and said, I can do that.
I love that story.
That's how we kind of started out and said there's a missing niche and can we make a period rum? And our research took us way back. We got our first batch of cane syrup in the molasses that we got in and found out that, ooh, wait a minute, it's not quite what they had in the period. Because today they use the top part of the molasses and back then they used the whole bottom half of the molasses barrel. So we had to find a manufacturer that actually made it as they would have had it back in the 1600s, late 1600s.
How did you find that out? I mean, what detail did you turn over to find out it was the bottom? And I mean, that's amazing amount of detail.
Well, it's a little scientific analysis to it. We were looking at what they were using to make cane sugar, and we knew they used the leftover product after making cane sugar. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, the technology has advanced since then, so they can actually get more and more and more and more of the sugar out. And what you have today is called blackstrap molasses. The blackstrap molasses is like the bottom 10th of the barrel. Hmm. Back then, they didn't have the technology to really get it all out. So they were able to get it out about half, maybe a little more of it. And what was left over was disposed of. And there's some records we found of them just disposing it in the Caribbean and how some of the waters in the Caribbean ran brown from the pollution of it. So it's kind of asides that you learn as you go along and are reading up on in some of the old books. But it's taken us back to some of the original writings of John Smith and some of the interpretations, some of the summaries of the writings that he had from then. That we've had to go back to the original documents, the inventories that they had for the ships, the ship's manifests.
So the molasses, if I remember correctly, I want to get to the corn also, because you did tremendous research and to get the correct kind of corn you're using, what basically people call Indian corn, non-GMO, whatever. I'll let you tell that story. You know, go ahead.
That was interesting because we got the first batch of corn in, and I got 2 tons of corn in.
Yeah.
And I had been doing some research by then and found out that, wait a minute, the corn that we're getting in here is heavy GMO component. And I looked at it and I said, it might affect the flavor. It might be completely different with all the GMO ingredients in it. And so I said, well, we've got to get the GMO out. So as we went on, the next year we contracted with a local farmer to grow heritage Indian corn, what in America you might call maize. Mm-hmm. The use of the term corn in the European English actually means grain. So the term corn is kind of an Americanized version that applies just to maize as it should be called. So we contracted with them and the taste was completely different.
Was it really?
Yeah. Yes. We were very, very, very pleased. The problem with it is the yield is very, very low. So the older corn has much heavier into the shell of the kernel and not as many carbohydrates, whereas the new modern corn, of course, has been bred to have heavy, heavy, heavy carbohydrates.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm one of those kids that used to pick off the big ears of corn back in the 50s when the harvest came to save for the next year, as much hybriding as we did. You know, so now it's super hybrided. And I think I mentioned this last time before we got on. When it came to hybriding, I'm sort of curious about that question because I raised my kids in DeKalb, Illinois, which was DeKalb ag corn.
Right.
And all our great friends kids and whatever grew up with the founders. I mean, people that started that way back when. And, but when I was a kid, we, basically how you thought you're going to have bigger, better corn the next year was to pull off the bigger, better ears of corn.
Right.
By hand, as you're harvesting it, and I didn't grow up on a farm, but our family was big enough. So I find that fascinating because I think the corn that you're using is the beautiful corn. I mean, even though it's, lesser, I mean, people use it effectively for decorations, I think is what, to explain what it looks like.
Corn we're using, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's great. So you went to the extent to get the right, how many acres of corn do they have to plant to fulfill your needs on it?
Yeah, the yield is quite low. So it takes about 3 acres to get the same yield that you get in a regular acre of corn. And it varies, but George Washington, Mount Vernon, has also decided to go with heritage corn too, and took up on our advice and is now contracting with the same farmer to grow heritage corn for their distilled spirits too.
Yeah, we have a local
rye. Now they're branching out into making a bourbon. George Washington's product, like you were mentioning, was 160 some years after, 160, 170 years after what we're producing. We were 1608.
Is that right?
They're 1790s. So 180 years after what we're producing.
Wow. I love the history of what you've done. Now, molasses, just fill in the piece, is you had to go to South America to get the right.
Yes. We had to contact our manufacturer and say, please help us find it because we can't find it. And he went about and finally found some distributor in South America that was making the bottom half. That's correct.
Okay, so now do you still have to do that, or have you found a more local resource? Or
no, we haven't. It's still the only source that we have. Nobody wants to produce it because it's different than the commercial releases that they have that they can produce big and fast. So it's a little higher dollar product.
The cool part I like about what comes out in your website is that people can go down there and have an authentic understanding and taste of what really happened, what was going on in the history that you brought to your product. And that, I think, is really interesting. I mean, that is just incredibly interesting.
We made our initial contact with Colonial Williamsburg to see if we can become an exhibit with them this week. And we were waiting to hear back from them whether they're ready for our full presentation or not.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can actually get into Colonial Williamsburg and become one of their exhibits, dress up. My employees are enthusiastic about wearing colonial costumes in the freezing cold of the winter.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. You know, they love their job. They love you, you know. They probably get free dentistry or whatever, I'm sure. But I think it's just cool what the story that you have. And what you're open on Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, or is it through the weekend?
Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, 1 to 7. We can ship our product within the state of Virginia. We're trying to contact or then there's a business opportunity for somebody. If somebody is interested in working with craft distillers and setting up a network to distribute from one state to another. It's a rather complex operation, but there's 1,000 craft distillers out there right now who would love to have somebody who could ship their product from one state to another for them legally. And right now we can't do that unless we set up agreements with every single state out there and do paperwork with every single state. It's not worth my while to set up 50 agreements with 50 states and then do the paperwork every month for selling one bottle in one state. It doesn't make any sense. So
yeah,
your readers want a business opportunity, tell them to call me.
Yeah, well, I'll when we're done with this, because where we're at, I'll give you some information that might help you on that. There might be a way to help to begin partially anyway for a few of the states. You know, in our federal laws and state laws have, in my opinion, and again, not to speak politically on it, but they don't make it easy on distillers. Honestly. I mean, you got these 3-tier systems in states, and you know, it just is very
connected with that. Believe it or not, I got a history tip for you on almost everything.
Okay.
Part of the reason they regulated it is because that's where the first tax revenues to support the federal government came from. For almost the first 100 years of the United States, the whiskey tax almost fully supported the federal government. And it started with, as you're familiar with, I know, the Whiskey Rebellion.
Yeah.
Where they passed the taxes to collect the money on the whiskey makers. And the whiskey makers sort of flipped their, you know what's at the federal government. And George Washington said, no, you're going to pay it, and organized an army. The interesting part about that is the guy that was making stills in that time period, Mr. Eisenhart, walked into my shop here one day, and he also repaired the wheels for the Whiskey Rebellion for George Washington to help get the army out there. But he walked in here with a 1750s design that his ancestor had made, a still, and we made a reproduction of that still. So we have a 1608 still, a 1620 still, the first still made in America. We have a 1750 still and a late 1798 reproduction of the one from Mount Vernon also.
Yeah.
We've collected quite a bit of history with it. But anyway, those taxes supported the government for 100 years. So it is an
sort of forgot. When you had somebody that found a way, again, going back historically a little bit, some of these things were used as medical products, or the stills were, but I guess the problem was taking glass and marrying it up to copper. And then there was a transition to all copper, correct?
Right. One of the problems we found in doing the research, we haven't found what many of the bases were. I can find pictures of them using the tops, glass tops, but I can't find any good pictures of what the bottoms were when they first started using them commercially. Because what they did is they would take these glass stills, I'll show you one in just a second.
Yeah.
And they would stack 10, 20 of them up on a fireplace, and the fireplace was specially made to hold them. But we can't find the single-use bases for them. There's no documentation. Like the first still in America, we know that it had a ceramic top. We can't find the ceramic bottom that matches. It was found here in Carter Grove, just up the street, the first still made in America. They didn't have coppersmiths, so they had to make it with what they had, and clay was the base for what they had. Which is kind of neat, because when I get European visitors into the shop here, they all look at that still and go, oh, my grandmother has one just like that. And it's kind of a neat validation of how things were made when people didn't have other resources. They would do with what they had.
That's fantastic. So give us a tour. You keep threatening to take us around the world here, so I'm ready to go. So what kind of device are you using? Are you using your phone, or are you...
Oh, this is my computer.
Your computer. Okay, great.
I can't get a good picture of that. Let me set it over here. So this is our 1608 product that we had made.
There you go. Very cool.
Right here. So it's got an original hand-blown bottle from the Jamestown Glass House right here. With the glasses they used at the time to drink out of, they had these little finger holds on them, because if they were drinking and they had greasy hands, it would keep the drink from sliding out of their hands. So they had it so they could grip it tight and hold it.
Interesting. Yeah.
This is one of the actual pieces they found in the excavation at Jamestown. So then the original grain from England went into it, and like I said, we got a double gold award, so it's kind of neat.
That is. So that glass sitting there is from the 1600s.
Oh, it's a reproduction of the bottle made in the 1600s.
Yeah.
Made by the Jamestown Glass House here in Jamestown.
And as soon as we find out who gave you the double gold, it's going to be a great day. You know, that's I got so many awards, I don't care. You know, it's either Oscars or Emmys, not really. So go ahead. I love this.
The other one that we have is, this is the reproduction that we had made of the original still from Jamestown that they found. And they found 7 pieces of 7 of them so far. So you can see the size of it. If I put my hand up here, you can see the size of it.
Yeah.
And this was about as large as they could get the stills at the time by the hand blowing technique. It's very hard. We had Corning make 3 of them for us, and we had another independent glass blower make 2. We've broken 2 of them so far, and they're at a cost of about $2,000 a piece because of the level of difficulty it is to make these things.
Yeah. And it's fascinating to think. I mean, you put together back in the 1600s, you know, my opinion growing up in the 1600s is that, you know, it still would have seemed like it was, you know, difficult to live in a frontier, you know, type situation. But honestly, it's remarkable the things that they thought to bring, you know, along with them, you know.
Well, there's a big difference in the technology about what they had and what they could do at different times. So when the first settlers came over here, they didn't really have a lot that they could do. But as the technology changed, as the years went by, they were able to bring more and more craftsmen over and able to access some of the resources differently as they had in Europe. But they couldn't do it when they first settled in.
Well, that is fabulous. So now, are you giving us the tour of your house, or are we at the?
Well, we're at the distillery now.
The distillery, okay.
So this is the first still made in America. It's a clay still that was a reproduction of the one found at Carter's Grove in around 1620.
Fascinating.
This still over here is a reproduction of the 1750 still made by Mr. Eisenhart, the guy that helped George Washington. And then next to it, we have a reproduction of George Washington's still from the period too, the Mount Vernon.
Very, very nice. That is really, really interesting. So when they, and I love the fact that they can come to your distillery, it's almost like a museum. I mean, you're really, you know, is this open to the public that they go in and see what you just showed us, or are you keeping it?
We're actually the back of a little old warehouse. It's a little hard to find. We've been doing research for the last 5 years, so it's not fancy.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'd love to put together, as we move over to Colonial Williamsburg, we'd love to put together it in a museum format where people could come in, because there's so much more connected with distillation than just distilled spirits. They also distilled perfumes, all the perfumes that you have today. And they distilled medicines. So we'd like to combine all of that into one museum that people could come in and see how the technology developed.
Oh, absolutely sensational. I hope you get the linkage with Colonial Williamsburg. I mean, if, you know, I can't imagine that they wouldn't, quite honestly. I mean, come on. Yeah, give a guy a break. He hasn't done anything in his life. You know, he's been an aerospace engineer. He's, you know, does root canals. He's got a Route 66 bucket list he wants to do. And he does historical, you know, stuff with distilleries. Probably doesn't even drink it, if I had to guess, you know, but, you know, who knows? It's, you know.
Enjoy products.
Yeah, I'm sure. Anyway, is there anything I forgot? You know, because if not, we're going to come back and do it again. You know, get it right, you know, one way or another.
Get on the plane and come out and see us.
Oh, we are. I've got on the calendar 73 days, because we're in the, we really enjoyed visiting with you today. It's been wonderful. I want to hear more about your bucket list trip, you know, as we go forward, come down to meet you. And we want everybody to go and enjoy a doctor, you know, a nuclear, I'm sure flights to the moon are in your future. Did you say visiting the tar pits in LA and things like that, you know?
Yeah, we're going to start out at the pier, go past the tar pits, and just come on right your way.
It sounds like fun. Can't wait to it. Anyway, Dr. Bill Dotson of 8 Shires Colonial Distillery down in Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia. Go down and visit him. Doc, I really appreciate the time. It's been a great day. Enjoyed every minute.
Thanks. Nice. It's been nice meeting you. Thank you.
Oh, we're not going to be far. We're going to be around. I love these interviews. I love the history part. I enjoy you. So anyway, be safe. Glad you're better.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.